Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Brilliant as the Sun, a retelling of Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 4. Krishna fulfills all desires. We are going to begin chapter 1, Manu's descendants. Maitreya names the descendants of Swambhuva Manu, giving a short account of some significant ones, which include several appearances of Vishnu's incarnations. Maitreya rose to stretch himself. The late afternoon sun cast a long shadow from his lean frame as he stood with upstretched arms. He leaned forward, placing his hands flat upon the ground, and then twisted from side to side. Seeing Vidur still seated, he said, "Are you tired? Shall we adjourn for the evening? Surely not, great sage. Your sublime description of how Devahuti achieved perfection has rejuvenated me. I would love to hear about the great Emperor Manu's other descendants." Verses 1 and 2, Maitreya smiled and sat back down. As well as Devahuti, Swambhuva Manu and Shatrupa had two other daughters, Akuti and Prasuti. He also had two sons. Despite this, when he gave his eldest daughter Akuti in marriage to Prajapati Ruchi, with his wife Shatrupa's approval, he stipulated that her firstborn son should be given to him to raise his own child. As his own child, Swambhuva Manu already had two sons, said Vidur. Why did he want to adopt his daughter's son? He knew Vishnu would incarnate through Akuti's womb and he was ambitious to have him as his son. Vidur nodded. That was understandable. Please tell me more about their descendants. Verses 3 to 5, Maitreya continued. Ruchi, who was appointed as a progenitor because he was strict in his spiritual practice, begot twins in the womb of his wife Akuti, a son and daughter. The boy whose name was Yajna was Vishnu's incarnation. The girl whose name was Dakshina was a partial incarnation of Vishnu's eternal consort, goddess Lakshmi. Swambhuva was overjoyed that Akuti had given birth to twins because after giving away Yajna, Ruchi would still have his daughter Dakshina. Verse 6, when they came of age, Dakshina was anxious to marry Yajna and he accepted her as his wife. Together they had 12 children. Vidur's eyes widened. How could a brother and sister marry? Maitreya explained that although it was unusual, as Yajna is a supreme lord and Dakshina his eternal consort, the goddess of fortune, there was no immorality. Vidur nodded in understanding. What were their children's names? Verse 9, they had 12 sons who became the gods named as Tushitas. During Swambhuva Manu's reign, at that time, Marichi became head of the 7 sages, and Yajna took the role of Indra, king of the gods. Meanwhile, Manu's two sons, Priyavrata and Uttanpad, became powerful kings whose sons and grandsons encompassed the universe. Verses 10 to 12, as you know, Manu gave his middle daughter Devahuti to sage Kardam. I have described them almost in full, remember, which was in Canto 3, which we were reading previously. From Manu's youngest daughter Prasuti married Brahma's son Daksha. So Manu's youngest daughter Prasuti, she got married to Brahma's son Daksha, another principal progenitor. His offspring also expanded all over the universe. I have told you that the 9 daughters of Kardam and Devahuti married 9 sages. I shall now describe their descendants. Night fell as the two men continued their discussion. Verses 13 and 14, Maitreya said, Kardam's daughter Kala, who married sage Marichi, gave birth to Kashyap and Purnima. Their descendants are spread throughout the world. Purnima had 3 children, Viraj, Vishwag and Devakulya, who is the deity of the water which washed Vishnu's lotus-like feet. When this water descended from the heavenly planets to earth, it became known as the Ganges. Verse 15. Another of Kardam's daughters, Anasuya, married sage Atri and gave birth to three famous sons, Soma, Dattatreya, and Durvasa, who were powerful representations of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, respectively. Verses 16 to 20, Vidur said, why did these three powerful deities who create, maintain, and destroy the universe appear in Anasuya's womb? Maitreya explained that when Brahma ordered Atri to produce offspring, the sage first went with his wife to Mount Riksha to practice asceticism. He built a small cottage by the banks of the Nirvindhya river amidst tinkling waterfalls, Ashoka trees with their beautiful red blossoms, and numerous other exotic plants. In that charming place, Atri practiced pranayam, keeping his mind and senses under strict control. He stood on one leg for 100 years, taking neither food nor water. Within himself he prayed, may the Lord of the universe be my shelter, and may he be pleased to give me a son exactly like him. Verse 21. While sage Atri engaged in his severe austerity, blazing fire came out of his head due to his breathing exercises. This was seen by Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Vidur looked surprised. Did fire literally burst from his head? Maitreya said, I am recounting the story as I heard it spoken. However, it is a good question. I have also heard it is said by authorities that the fire is a metaphor for mental satisfaction. Then how was it seen by the deities? Vishnu is the supersoul in the hearts of all living beings, said Maitreya. He saw Atri's self-satisfaction, and by his will so did Brahma and Shiva. Therefore all three deities were pleased to appear before the sage. Verse 22. Since Atri was famous for his austerities, when the three deities approached his hermitage, other heavenly denizens such as Apsaras, Gandharvas, Siddhas, Vindhyadhars, and Nagas, they accompanied them. Verse 23 to 25. Atri was still standing on one leg, was delighted. With great difficulty he hopped toward them. The sage folded his palms and gazed up at the deities, holding a discus. Vishnu was mounted on his great eagle carrier Garuda. Shiva sat upon his bull Nandi, holding a drum, and Brahma, holding kusha grass, was aboard his celestial swan. All three were smiling, and Atri also began to smile in great joy. Dazzled by their bodily effulgence, he closed his eyes. Verses 26 to 28. Atri bowed his head. Gathering his senses, he opened his eyes and gazed upon the three deities. They were a spectacular sight. Tears flowed down his cheeks and his body trembled. He concentrated his mind and said, my lords, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, you have divided yourself into three bodies by accepting the three modes of nature. You do this in every millennium to create, maintain, and dissolve the universe. I offer my respects unto you all, and I humbly request you to tell me which of you is supreme. I pray to the one supreme Lord of the universe, who is beyond the reach of the mind, for a son like him. Now I see that the three of you have come here. I am therefore confused as to which of you is the supreme deity. Verses 29 to 31. The three great deities again smiled. In unison they replied, dear Brahmin, you are perfect in your determination, and therefore as you have decided, so it will happen. It cannot be otherwise. We are all the same person upon whom you were meditating, and therefore we have all come here. You will have sons who will partially manifest your potencies. Because we desire your good fortune, those sons will glorify your reputation throughout the world. Verses 32 to 35. As Atri and his wife Anasuya looked on in astonishment, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva disappeared. Soon after, Anasuya gave birth to three sons, the moon god Soma, the great sage Dattatreya, and the powerful mystic Durvasa. Each was endowed with a portion of the respective deity's power. Maitreya leaned back against the tree and closed his eyes while he gathered his thoughts. He had described the progeny of Kardam's first two daughters, Kala and Anasuya, but had yet to describe the offspring of Kardam's other daughters. He said, now hear from me the sage Angira's many children. He married Kardam's third daughter, Shraddha. They had 4 daughters and 2 sons, Uttaya and the learned scholar Brihaspati. Verses 36 and 37, Kardam's fourth daughter Havirbhu and her husband Pulastya begot two saintly sons. The first was Agastya, and who later took birth as Haharagni. The second was Vishrava, who had two wives. His first wife, Idavida, gave birth to Kuver, the lord of Yakshas. His second wife, Keshini, gave birth to three sons, Ravan, Kumkarn, and Vibhishan. Verses 38 and 39, Kardam's fifth daughter Gati had three sons with her husband sage Pulaha. Kardam's sixth daughter Kriya married Kritu. They had 60 sons known as Valakhilles, sages whose bodies glowed with their high spiritual knowledge. Verses 40 to 42, Kardam's eighth daughter Urja, also known as Arundhati, married Vasishtha, and they had 7 perfectly pure sage sons headed by Chitraketu. Vasishtha begot other competent sons on another wife. Sage Atharva married another Kardam of Kardam's daughter Chitti, also known as Shanti. After performing a great vow, they had a powerful son named the Dayancha. Verses 43 to 44, another of Kardam's daughter Khyati had 2 sons by her highly qualified husband Bhrigu. They also had one daughter named Shri, who was very much devoted to the Supreme Lord. The 2 sons of Bhrigu, Dhata and Vidhata, married sage Meru's 2 daughters Ayati and Niyati, whose sons were Mrikanda and Pran. Verse 45, Mrikan's son is sage Markandeya, Prana's son is sage Vedasira. Shukracharya, also known as Ushan, and Kavi is Vedasira's son. Thus, Shukracharya is Bhrigu's great-grandson. Maitreya leaned back against the tree and closed his eyes in thought. Each of Kardam's daughters had chosen to marry one of Brahma's sage sons. Had he listed all their children and important lineage, once he was certain, he opened his eyes. Verses 46 and 47, my dear Vidur, the descendants of these sages by Kardam's daughters expanded the population of the universe. Anyone who faithfully hears the histories of this dynasty will be freed of all their sinful reactions. Verses 48 to 52, Manu's youngest daughter Prasuti married Brahma's son Daksha. They had 16 beautiful daughters. 13 of them married Dharma, and one was given to Agni. Of the remaining 2 daughters, one went to Pitriloka, where she resides very happily. The other was given to Lord Shiva, who delivers the most sinful people from material entanglement. On Vidur's request, Maitreya named Dharma's 13 wives and their respective children. Hearing that the Lord's incarnation is the sages Nara and Narayan, the earth's presiding deities, were among their descendants. Pray tell me more about their birth. Please listen, said Maitreya. Verses 53 to 57, Murti lay back exhausted. From the heavens, symphonic music celebrated the birth of her 2 sons, and rose petals fell from the sky. Dharma, who had been pacing up and down outside the birthing room, flung open the door and rushed in. Murti lifted her head, smiling broadly. Hearing a chorus of Vedic hymns, she glanced past him to see throngs of chanting sages, each beaming with joy. She lay her head back on her pillow as the jubilant Dharma cradled each son. From outside the room, the sounds of merriment and song resounded. The Supreme Lord has appeared as our sons. There is a great celebration outside. How do they know? Dharma smiled. All signs of good fortune are visible. Even as they spoke, the 2 infants grew quickly in the manner of the celestials. Within minutes, they were children, and Dharma offered them clothes. Just then Brahma walked in, followed by the chief gods, and they offered prostrated obeisance to the boys. Standing up, they folded their hands, and Brahma said, we offer our respects to Dharma's son. They are the supreme person from whom the cosmos has emanated, and in whom it rests as air and clouds rest in space. They will be renowned as the divine sages Nara and Narayan. The gods exclaimed, "Praise to Nara and Narayan, Dharma's effulgent sons," continued growing until they achieved adulthood. Brahma continued, "My lords, your identity is revealed in the Vedic literatures. Your appearance has created peace and prosperity and destroyed all worldly calamities. Kindly glance on us gods with your lotus petal eyes, which deride the beauty of the spotless lotus where Lakshmi resides." Somewhere in the forest, a lion roared. Unperturbed, Maitreya threw wood onto the fire and continued speaking. Verse 58, "My dear Vidur, when the gods offered their prayers, Nara and Narayan glanced over them with great mercy. After touching the feet of their mother and father, they departed for Gandhamadan mountain. They are both full incarnations of Krishna," asked Vidur. Verse 59, "Nara is a partial manifestation of Krishna and Narayan is the Lord himself. They have appeared in the dynasties of Kuru and Yadu respectively as Arjun and Krishna to mitigate the earth's burden. I have now named all descendants of Dharma's 13 wives who were Daksha's daughters." Vidur asked Maitreya to describe the descendants of Daksha's other daughters, verses 60 and 61. Maitreya said, "Swaha." His 14th daughter married Agni, the fire god. Together they had 3 sons, Pavaka, Pavamana, and Shuchi, whose food is the oblations offered in sacrificial fires. From these 3 sons, another 45 fire gods were born, including their grandfather Agni and their 3 fathers. There are 49 fire gods. Vidur said, "So many, how are there enough offerings for them all?" Verse 62, Maitreya laughed. "The Brahmins who wish to enter the Lord's impersonal energy perform many Vedic sacrificial fire ceremonies. When offering oblations, they do so in the name of each fire god. What about Daksha's 15th daughter, Swadha?" Verses 63 and 64, "She married the 4 pitas, some who do and some who do not accept the fire sacrifice. Swadha begot 2 daughters from pitas, Vayuna and Dharini. They were attracted to the Lord's impersonal energy, Brahman, and became expert in the transcendental Vedic knowledge. Did the 16th daughter have children?" Verse 65, "She was Sati who married Lord Shiva. Even though she faithfully served her husband, she never bore him children." "How surprising," said Vidur. "Why?" Verse 66, Sati's father Daksha constantly criticized the faultless Shiva. Because of this, Sati used her mystic powers to give up her body while she was still too young to bear a child. The bright moon disappeared behind clouds, and somewhere in the far distance, wolves howled. This brings us to the end of the first chapter, Manu's descendants. Next time we'll read from chapter 2 of Canto 4, Daksha curses Lord Shiva. Thank you for joining, and please chant and be happy. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.